Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
Between our musical tastes and over the past couple of years doing this podcast, we have covered music that, it spans a lot of decades.
We sure do, Jim. There's no doubt about that. Do you have a favorite decade?
Well, of course, I'm going to say the 80s, man. That is my go to.
Huh. Would you say you're kind of stuck in the 80s?
You know, let's bring in somebody to help us with that. Hello and welcome back once again, everyone, to Two Guys Talking About Records, a vinyl community podcast where today we're back to three guys talking about records. But more than that, we're talking about a decade that helped define who I am. Steve, it brought you in there as well. We're talking about the 80s and whether or not it's a good thing to be stuck in the 80s. And for that, we have a special guest today, Mr. Steve Spears, host of the Stuck in the 80s podcast.
Hey, guys. Great to be here.
Thank you. Well, let's get the introductions. My name's Jim, and I own a record store.
I am Steve, and I'm a record collector.
And Steve, you are a podcaster.
And I am Steve as well, and I'm a podcaster, yes.
All right.
And an author.
And a new author, yes.
Yes, that's cool.
So we're bringing Steve in today to kind of shed a little more light on this decade that I'll say it right out front. It helped define me as a person. Musically, culturally, just in general, my personality as well stems a great deal from the 80s. I'm at the leading edge of that Gen X type of stuff. And I think, Steve, you were at the tail end of the boomers, but we'll count you as Gen X if you'd like.
I was the last year of the boomer. After I was born, they go, oh, let's just move on to something else. So what can you say?
And Steve, you're smack dab in it with me, right? Right in that upper Gen X, and it's such a cool decade to look back to.
Yeah, I'm 58, so I'm sort of right there in the sweet spot. Yeah, it's crazy. Every time I talk to somebody and I ask them what's the appeal of the 80s, and they say, if you grew up in that time, it's just part of your DNA. It's like we all went to the same high school and we all knew each other's names.
Yep.
And that sticks with you, 20, 30, 40 years later.
Well, throughout the episode today, we're going to be talking with Steve about the 80s, about your podcast, about your new book, and about some cruise things that you do. This is kind of a cool, everything revolving around the 80s that you're involved with. It's really kind of a neat project all around, isn't it?
It is grown from a work assignment to basically my number one hobby and preoccupation these days. So I could not have foreseen the direction it would go in when I started this 20 years ago.
Very cool. Well, we'll get into that with you over the course of today's episode. But as we do each and every week, Steve and I like to start off the show with, because we're talking about records, so we like to talk about our most recent additions to the collection. And Steve, what do you say? What do we say about inviting Steve in on this and see if you've got a couple he wants to show off first?
You know what? I'm very curious because I know Steve says he's been buying vinyl, and so I'm extremely curious what you're picking up and what you're enjoying, Steve.
Okay, you want me to start?
Please do.
Yes.
Oh, jeez. Okay, so little background. I loved vinyl in the 80s, and I had been through every musical format, starting with my uncle giving me 8-track tapes and whatnot, and making the jump to vinyl, but vinyl's always stuck with me. It took me a long time to reacquire a good turntable so I could enjoy it again. But once I did, I started going nuts now with buying vinyl, and it is kind of like, it is sort of a vice. So let's see, what do I have? Okay, so number one on my my list of things, I love to find the dance mixes of the Frankie Goes to Hollywood songs from the 80s, from the mid 80s. So this is Welcome to the Pleasure Dome, a dance. It's still in the nice shiny wrapper. I haven't taken it out yet for a spin. But I used to love just the esoteric weirdness of every Frankie Goes to Hollywood album. Like, I would read the liner notes. Even the liner notes on the back of this are insanely incomprehensible, and that's what I love so much about it. There is... Speaking of, I'm wearing a Journey shirt, which is the that was like my gateway drug to the 80s, going to a Journey concert. When I was a kid, I was infatuated with live albums, and this one was my favorite. This is Journey Captured. And the trouble with this album is, I mean, it's recorded from their Departure tour, which I think was 1980. The trouble with this is, someone helped me find a copy where the actual 2 records are playable. I can find ones that have a nice cover like this one and all the concert photos inside. I cannot find one that has two records that are both playable. Like one of them will be playable and the other one will be speech garbage. So the quest continues. But that's what I like about albums is like you're looking for, Excalibur. You're looking for the sword and the stone, and so the search continues for the perfect version of that. And then this one I picked up. This is Dennis DeYoung's Desert Moon. Mm-hmm. This one I picked up at Banana Records in St. Petersburg. This gigantic vinyl store, just rows upon rows to the ceiling of vinyl. And you really have to you could spend hours in there looking for something and not find it, or you could spend 5 minutes in there and walk out of there with 10 albums. That's what's great about Bananas. But when I talked to Dennis DeYoung for the podcast, he and I talked a lot about Desert Moon and why he made a solo album and why he never wanted to make a solo album and the whole Mr. Roboto fiasco. And so to me, when I pick up an album like that, it just opens up so many stories for me. And I think that's what I look for in my vinyl. I look for unlocking the stories.
Very cool. Good additions there. Always fun.
Well, yeah. Yeah, with all the interviews you did, I mean, I could just see going out shopping would be like, oh, God, I talked to this. We talked about this album. And, yeah, definitely a lot of stories.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it's just, the Journey one opens up. I think I've interviewed 2 members of Journey now. I've got a third one on the line. So, yeah, it is crazy. I mean, but then I look at Frankie Goes to Hollywood and I'm thinking, I still got to get Holly Johnson on the phone someday. And so it's like,
and forgive me for noticing, but I couldn't help but see that Steve Perry Christmas album in the background also.
Oh yeah, signed by Steve Perry.
So very cool.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
All right, Steve, what do you got for us this week?
Last week I promised to give you something to show something super special.
Yep.
And West Virginia Snake Handlers Revival. This is a live broadcast from the last Snake Handlers Church in the United States. In 1972, there were 500 of them. 100 ministers have died because of snake bites. So a lot of everybody but West Virginia outlawed them. And so leave it to West Virginia. Why? Nah, they're going to be all right. This is incredibly good. It rocks. These guys know rock and roll. And what's funny, I gotta show you this. All right, so a couple members of the congregation. There's the 2 ministers. One of them sounds like Lux Interior from the Cramps when he gets going. They do some preaching, but they got these crazy guitars. But let's see, where's this picture? Right there. See that old lady on the drums? She's like 80 years old, and she's the drummer, and she just keeps the beat going. It is nuts. Someone had shown this, Vinyl Richie, actually, and I thought, well, that sounds like the strangest thing ever. And, oh, my God, it's excellent. So try to find that one for a sound sample, Jim. Good luck on that.
All right.
The name of the album is They Shall Take Up Serpents. And so
Steve,
you've amazingly good.
You've hit on a primal fear for me, by the way, with that one. So.
Yeah, no kidding.
The minister said, yeah, one time I got bit, my arm swelled up. They thought they were going to have to cut it off, but it got better. Sometimes church can just be fun.
Sure. And sometimes it can be deadly. All right.
Yes, that's right. I found this. This is an original Charles Mingus from 1961, and it is Blues and Roots, and it's before Charles Mingus really got nutsy with his jazz and went more free jazz. Quite good. There's a store about 15 miles from me in a little town called Castle Rock. And she dropped some blues, and she told me that, and there was this great jazz album. So I grabbed that. My friend Jim Gleason was in Detroit and went record shopping, and he sends me he's sending me a text. Hey, I'm in the store. Anything you want? And then he sends a picture, and I wound up getting a bootleg of the Sex Pistols. Welcome to the Rodeo, the Sex Pistols. It's a bootleg, all right. So some of the recordings pretty good, and some of it is not as good. But the audience, oh my God, they are not happy. They're just, it is one rowdy group in Texas. You know, you can just see Sex Pistols walking into Texas, going, "Howdy, y'all." So, oh Lordy, pretty funny. Yeah, just a fun bootleg to have. And then Jim sent me this. It's a group out of Switzerland called the Hillbilly Moon Explosion with Monsters and Gods. So thank you for that, Jim. I have several albums from them. It's rockabilly with a little psychobilly in this. So they kind of add both in there, but quite good.
It's like the Swiss Cramps.
And yeah, kind of a Swiss Cramps. You know, yeah. There's French Cramps. There's English Cramps. I got Swiss Cramps. And let's do the last one. I had another record collector come into town, into Denver, Alex from Beer and Vinyl. And so we went to our big record store. It's kind of like Bananas, Steve. This is just a huge store. You go in, you go, you know, where do I go? But I found this one. This is Question Mark, which obviously, this is Nigerian rock from 1977. Steve, I'm heavy into African rock from the 70s. Zimrock. Now, what is it? Nige rock? I don't know what you call it. It's not as fuzzy as the Zamrock from Zambia is, but it was quite good. Except the photography is absolutely god awful. But you know, what are you going to do about it? So from 1977, Question Mark. The last great rock LP from Nigeria's post-Civil War underground. Okay, there we have it.
So cliche.
Yeah, I know. So,
and not to be confused with our own Mid-Michigan Question Mark, by the way.
That's right. This is not. There are no Mysterians involved in this one. None at all. So, good luck on the sample hunting, Jim.
Thanks.
You know.
Thanks. I may even have some trouble with one of mine, but we'll see what's on Spotify. So, just a couple this week on my end, Steve. And one, okay, I have to harken back to my radio days, way back. And this is, again, we'll go back to the 80s for my college radio days, from 85 through 90 straight up, and then unofficially for a few years after that. For many of those years, I went by the DJ name of Nick Danger, which was kind of almost a Dread Pirate Roberts type of thing that was passed down from another DJ before that I took the mantle up, and I don't know if anybody did after I did, but Nick Danger was a character through the Firesign Theater. If I tilt my camera up here, you can actually see I've got some memorabilia hanging back there from the Firesign album, One Nick Danger and How Can You Be in Two Places. And for a while on my Discogs want list, I have had this interesting Nick Danger promo album. And this is from the How Can You Be in Two Places era, 1969. And this is the Nick Danger Private Eye Case number 666. Promotional item that was sent to radio stations in 69 as part of the release of that album. But interesting, it was not sent in any kind of a cardboard sleeve. It was just quite literally an inner sleeve, a paper inner sleeve, and then the white label promo record for itself. There's the Columbia white label on there. So that's been on my want list for quite some time, simply because I wanted to have that for my olden days. And one popped up on Discogs that was actually fairly reasonable and in decent shape, so I snagged it. And it's radio-friendly cuts off of the longer side, too, of How Can You Be in One, or How Can You Be in Two Places at Once, from that album from Firesign. So comedy, not a go-to, obviously, listening here in the store a great deal, but still fun to have. Okay.
Very
Secondly,
nice.
I've had Low Spark of High Heel Boys from Traffic for quite some time, and I put out a big Traffic drop, and there was a copy of Shootout at the Fantasy Factory. And I had not had this one in the collection before. It's okay. The shape's not great. The cover's a little bent. But what's cool, and much like Low Spark, the corner cuts, it's a die cut cover on both of these albums from Traffic. And I asked our good buddy Grok, Steve, why that was. And they said, well, A, it was just kind of an artistic nod at the time. But B, Traffic was trying to make a statement about the record labels, and sometimes that they would send these back to the cutout bins because they didn't sell well.
Yeah.
So they would actually cut the corners off. We've seen this before on lots of albums. If you see a corner or a notch cut, that means it was sent back as an overstock or a return item. And so this was just kind of them saying, oh, yeah, well, this music is already pre done, so it's already cut out. So,
Does that mean they were kind of saying, this album might suck, so let's just make it the cutout
Yeah,
for them right away?
it was deliberate. They said it was humorously implying that the album was already damaged goods. So, that's kind of what they're saying. And then finally this week, this one was a Record Store Day release several years back. This is the group Brownout, and part of their Brown Sabbath series, where it's real funkified Black Sabbath. This one was from 2014, so it goes back a little way. I opted out of the Record Store Day release. I remember when this came out, and I was gonna get it because I've got one of the other Brownout Brown Sabbath albums, one of the live ones. But they only released it as the Record Store Day as a 45 RPM double LP. And I'm not a fan of those, and I think we've talked about that before. So I had to put in an order on Discogs for somebody else, and this was in the cellar. It is not in the best of shape, but it's still very cool. It's just these very funkified versions of Black Sabbath. Not all of them instrumental all the way on there, but some of them are. But so yeah, we've got The Wizard on here, Iron Man, NIB, Black Sabbath, Planet Caravan, and Hand of Doom. This one I know I can find some samples for, and I know we've talked about these guys before, Steve. They're fun.
Who doesn't love a funky Iron Man? I mean, that just screams funk.
You throw some of that brass in there, you're like, well, it works. It works.
Yeah, it does. It does.
All right. So as we do with the pickups and anything else we happen to talk about in each of the episodes, we'll put together a Spotify playlist so you folks can listen in on some of the music that we're showcasing here. You can find a link to that Spotify playlist in the description of our Believe podcast episode, which then in turn takes it to Spotify and all the rest. Just look in the description for that link. And on the YouTube episode as well, we'll have a link down there. Now, challenging as it's going to be, I'll do what I can for Steve's selections to see if I can find some Snake Handler music to put in there, and we'll see.
It's awesome.
The journey, I think, might be a little bit easier, Steve. So.
Yeah.
So onward to the 80s. Actually, it would be backwards to the 80s. Let me preface this conversation, Steve, by just saying that I mentioned earlier that the 80s were really a formative era for me as well. When 1980 came around, I was already in high school. I just started high school. So that 10-year span of the 80s saw me enter being in high school. I graduated from high school. I worked for a couple of years, and then I went to college. And by the time 1990 came around, I was just graduating from college. So that is, you mentioned the sweet spot, and I think that is really the sweet spot culturally for a lot of stuff. It's affected my life, and I can call up almost an encyclopedic knowledge of useless information from time to time, whether it be quotes or things from movies or most importantly music. But musically, that saw me go from hard rock, the AC/DC that you talk about in your book as well, talking with those guys, through college radio music, REM, and then into punk rock. And then it kind of wraps up as we head into the grunge era. So that, for me, an important decade, but also I think one culturally that took us through so much. And there's so much depth is what I guess I'm trying to say. And I think that's what you get across in your podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you and I are very much alike in the sense that I started high school in the 80s and I finished college in 89. So, like you, I mean, my entry drug to rock and roll was Kiss and, Kiss Alive 2. And it
Yeah.
evolved into someone handing me a Styx album and then someone giving me a Cars album. And then, someone giving me a Duran Duran, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Hoodoo Gurus, Husker Du. I mean, it just kind of goes, I mean, it's just
Yep.
this wonderful little journey. And it's sort of like this little, it's just like life. I mean, you evolve. I think you evolve more during that period of your life than you do any other period of your life because you are coming into your adult or teenhood, your adulthood. You start the 80s not knowing what you want to even be in your life. And that now it is 1990. And it's like, find a job, bum. So, I mean, it for so many people our age, it is this common language that we speak. And the podcast over the last 20 years, that is sort of the tool that we use to communicate amongst the community or the family that's formed around the nostalgia for the 80s.
What I found in the 80s, I actually started getting money in the 80s because I started working in 81 when I graduated in college, so I could actually buy some more records. But music exploded in so many different directions in the 80s. You had, the new wave, you had the new romantics, you had thrash, you had post-punk, post-rock, synth pop. It was incredible how it just blew up and it just scattered everywhere to the winds. And that was something I really remember. So you're trying to think, all right, what music do I like? Because it was spiraling everywhere and it was very exciting to see and hear.
I think that's kind of the germ of Stuck in the 80s was that I think the explosion in music and the genres and that question of what kind of music do I like? I think in the 90s I was trying to like grunge and Green Day and Smashing Pumpkins, and it's more or less to a certain extent I appreciated it. But I think circa 2005, I just decided to own the music that I liked, whether it made any sense or not. So on any given day, I could listen to the Dead Kennedys, Fresh Fruit for Rotten Vegetables, and then I could 1 hour later put on Invisible Touch by Genesis. And in my mind, there's no conflict whatsoever. And that, in my mind, was sort of what Stuck in the 80s gave to people was the ability to just be who you are.
Let's talk a little bit more about your podcast because Steve and I have been doing this now with ours for over 2 years. And to me, that seems like a heck of a long time. And with so many podcasts out there right now, I think that 2 years is a long time. But then we look at what you've been doing for over 2 decades. It's incredible. Tell us a little bit about why this podcast started and where you've taken it over these past 20 plus years.
That's a great question. It started so unlikely. Back in 2005, I was working for the internet department of the St. Petersburg Times, which was the daily newspaper for Tampa Bay in Florida. And it was the largest newspaper in Florida, and it was a very prestigious newspaper to be at. But the internet was still like the Harry Potter under the stairwell kind of
Yes.
department at the newspaper. And we were starting to hear, we'd already we'd already done blogging, and we were starting to hear about podcasting, and nobody knew what it was. I think I had just gotten my first iPod. And I mean, I'm talking the old one with no screen, just looks like a little, looks like a remote control for your garage one. You remember those?
Yeah.
I mean, that
I'll have one.
I think I do too somewhere, but our boss said, "Hey, someone here has to start a podcast so we can learn how to do it. Like, I don't need you to reinvent the wheel. I just need you to learn the process." And so everybody pitched an idea or two, and I pitched 2 ideas. One was high school football, because I was a high school football referee at the time in my part-time. Or if you want, I could do something about the 80s. And she said, just a gut feeling, but I think the 80s will resonate more with people. And so I found the music critic who worked for the newspaper was still there downstairs, Gina Vivanetto, and let's just try this thing and see what happens. She and I grew up in Tampa Bay at the same time and went to a lot of the same concerts. So we had a lot of the same stories, and I just thought it'd be fun to sit down and let's just tell our stories. And if people want to listen, that's great. But at the very least, we learn how to do this crazy thing. And we started doing it. And I don't think we ever intended to go more than 5 or 6 episodes. But then we started getting emails from across the country. And, well, you know what? We could start a blog at the same time. Just kind of like, just to kind of keep track of our ideas on off show days. And then people started reading that and leaving comments. And it just kept growing, and we kept saying, we'll do 20 episodes and call it quits. There's no reason for this to become a full-time, chore for us. And then that was 20 years ago, and suddenly here we are. Every day I wake up and I just kind of wonder, how do we get here?
Yeah. Well, cool. Congrats.
How hard has it been? Yeah, through the years, you've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people on the podcast. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing when you read the book, the people you have gotten in. How hard was it at the start to try to bring in these people? It's a podcast. A what?
That is the best question that nobody ever asks me. It was impossible. It was. I don't know how many people I had to explain it to them. And at the very beginning, I'm not sure I knew myself what I was saying. And so I'd say, look, I'm interviewing you. It's going to be audio, but I'll write an article for the newspaper too. So because that was their major concern. If I talk to you, if I spend 30 minutes talking to you, is anybody going to read this? I'm like, they're going to hear it. But is anybody going to read this? I'm like, okay. So a lot of the early shows, I would write an article as a result. Like, Rick Springfield's coming to town. Here's our interview with him. Eddie Money's coming to town. I talked to him. Here's our interview in the paper and stuff like that. So that's what they wanted at first. But yeah, it was a gigantic obstacle. Nowadays, it's I wouldn't say it works the opposite, but it sometimes feels that way because they're like, oh no, another podcast interview? Really? Do I have to?
Oh, well, you've met so many of them also on these cruises you do and everything. I mean, it's just the pictures in the book, and you've met and talked with my heartthrob Terry Nunn.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, oh, crush, Jim. I had a crush on her, man.
Every human male who speaks words and language has a crush. She, so there was a company that started doing 80s cruises 10 years ago. The 10th anniversary edition leaves here in a couple weeks. And every year they get 10 or 20 bands to perform during this week-long cruise. So it's like 70 concerts over the course of 7 days. And Berlin came on year 2. And people went crazy for Berlin. I mean, just everywhere they went on the ship. I mean, because they were so entertaining, and she's everything you want her to be. Mm-hmm. And so I had a chance to interview her for the first time, like after that first appearance on the 80s cruise. And she just is just this flirty, funny, entertaining, gorgeous in person, so giving. We had like a 20th anniversary party for our podcast over the summer. She sent a video greeting, congratulating us. She's on this upcoming cruise, and she'll be our special guest. I host the trivia sessions on the cruise, and every day we have a special VIP guest who is up there with us, and it becomes like an impromptu Q&A. And she'll be there with us. I'll get her to give you a little video greeting.
Oh, that would
hi, Steve. I'm thinking of you, Terry Nunn.
Yes. That would be the highlight of my life.
Yeah. When you meet, it's surreal talking to people on the phone that are your heroes.
Yeah.
But when you meet them in person, it never goes how you dream it will. And I mean that in the best way. They're always so giving and charitable with their time, and just happy to talk to you and shake your hand and stand for a photo and hear a story about how their music, meant the world to you at some important part of your life. I remember talking to Midge Ure from Ultravox on a cruise a couple years ago, and he was telling me that the story of Dancing with Tears in Your Eyes and how it's based on the movie On the Beach, which is a movie in the late 50s about nuclear apocalypse.
Yep.
And it was my dad's favorite movie. My dad died about 10 years ago. And I remember right shortly before his death, we watched that movie together for the first time. And so Midge is telling the story, and I just melt there on stage, and people are like, it's going to be, Midge is like, I'm sorry, Steve. I didn't mean to make you cry. it's when you have those kind of moments, you hold on to them forever. And, that was the great opportunity of the book, was to retell some of those stories, telling stories about John Parr playing you an acoustic version of St. Elmo's Fire, or, Pete Byrne from Naked Eyes singing Rocket Man to you backstage. It's those moments, they stick with you. And I just felt like I wanted to share them.
Yeah. Well, this book it's out in advance, correct? It's stuck in the 80s. But
you
for a wider release.
You can pre-order the ebook now, and then the paperback will be available on March 11th.
Okay. And it's basically, it's a great book kind of recounting this past couple decades, your journey in meeting a lot of these people and talking to them and bringing their stories out through your interactions with them.
Yeah, it's so unlikely because I as I say in the book, I don't think I hammer the point too much, but I've never been a full-time writer. I've always been like somebody in the background. I've always been an online editor or a copy editor or a page designer. Writing and interviewing was never something I trained to do, and podcasting sort of opened the door to that. And the great thing about a podcast interview is it's there. It lives on forever, as long as that MP3 file is out there. So you could write a newspaper article that be in a landfill a week from now, but my interview with, Olivia Newton-John still is out there in, cyberspace. So it collecting those and deciding which of them made the book, and sharing the stories that why I relate to particular artists, that was the challenge of the book.
Well, at first, for those out there listening or watching, this book, it's a fast read. It's like 300 pages, but you blow through it quickly. It's so interesting and so fascinating. Yeah, a love of anything dealing with music. This is excellent, Steve. I mean, I was just kind of, God, it's the first time I've ever read anything off my iPad, because I'm old, man. It's like, it's not a real book. What do I do here? My kids just look at me, Dad, why don't you just get a Kindle? But I loved it. But how long did it take to write? And was it difficult, or did it come pretty easy for you?
I would say it took about 2 years to write. Obviously, it takes 20 years to research. It took 2 years to write. It's probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. When I started it thinking, I've written hundreds of articles, thousands of articles, not as a full-time writer again. They would have had 10 times the experience I did, but I'm no stranger to a keyboard. I didn't think it would be that difficult. But it is when you're thinking, I'm not just writing 300 words today. I need to write 300 pages, and it was hard. I don't think at the beginning I knew what the through line was for the book. I don't think I realized that, until 3/4 of the way through. So I would just go back and tackle them one interview at a time. Oh, all right, let's talk about when I interviewed Taylor Dane. Let's go back and revisit that. Let's go back and listen to the interview that I did with Colin Hay from Men at Work, and what are my takeaways from that now? And so it came together in 100 different pieces, and just towards the end, it just magically found a way where it started to make sense to me, where I was learning things from interviews I'd done 20 years ago that I didn't understand then, but I understand now. And that's when that started to take shape in my head. I knew there was a vision that was coming into clarity.
When you're compiling all of these older interviews that you've done over the past 20 years and putting them together for the book, obviously you're re-listening to a lot of them, you're going back, you're revisiting the conversations. I'm going to take this conversation back to the 80s overall. Did the rehashing of these and living through them originally, did that give you more of a sense of what kind of a decade that was in the formation of you as a person or us as a society, and what this decade culturally did for us where we are now all these years later?
Yes. What I think it did was it gave me, it clarified the realization that back then, 40 years ago, it felt like we all spoke the same language and had the same values. And I don't feel that way anymore. And so revisiting that time was soothing to me in many ways, because you are talking to these people from all these different genres. I mean, I think if there's any genre I didn't really get to do very much hip hop and punk, but the value, the genres that I listened to, my friends listened to, and they shared those same sensibilities and same fears and same hopes. And that was a soothing kind of trip back into time. I sometimes call the podcast the time machine, or the podcast time machine.
Yeah.
And I hoped in some ways that the book would do that for people, to take you back to the moment when you first listened to Duran Duran and how you felt about it, or remind you of your senior prom date who really was into REO Speedwagon and wanted to dance to Keep on Loving You, and stuff like that. These memories that are part of you today, these memories that kind of make you who you are today, even if you don't quite know it.
Steve, okay, so that's exactly what happened. Now, again, the book, it's not just music, it's TV shows, it's movies, it's all from the 80s. So I'm reading, and you talk about Miami Vice. And you mentioned that. And immediately I think about bad fashion choices. I remember when Miami Vice came out, me and this other guy, we were assistant managers, and we were, oh, wow, look at those clothes. So we're out there, we buy the linen jackets, we have the linen pants, these pointy shoes, and we look great. At least in our minds, we look great. The problem is, we're living in Minneapolis in the winter, and we're walking around in linen pants and these pointy vinyl shoes. And it was like the worst fashion choice ever. We might have looked good, but there's frostbites in parts that we don't want to have. And it's just like, I just began thinking of that when I'm reading this book. God, yeah, Miami Vice, man.
The same problem, we had the inverse problem here in Florida growing up. Trench coats and all these sort of things were so cool in the 80s. Like you wanted to dress like the Sex Pistols, or you wanted to dress like Billy Idol, so you wanted to wear a lot of leather and trench coats. Nobody owns a trench coat in Florida. I mean, we would go to the teen dance clubs and we'd be like, "Oh God, it's so hot! Like, please don't play any Depeche Mode right now, because I just need to calm down."
Never thought of it that way, but
going back a little bit too, the idea of being a Gen Xer, Steve, you and I are of that generation. We're kind of referred to now as the lost generation. We're the ones that are just kind of sitting idly by, watching everything happen, but with kind of a quiet understanding of why things are the way they are, because we've been on both sides of that coin. And I think that a lot of the culture in the 80s had a lot to, in addition to the upbringing that many of us went through, where we had to be so individualistic as far as, our support systems. We come home from school, make ourselves a snack, and do whatever we had to do, household chores, or getting a job at age 16 and working for that car. The music and the culture of that era, I think, is very reflective of that. And it's, for me, a lot of times listening to some of these takes me back to those times where it's, I feel pretty good about what I did to get to where I am, but again, based on what we were experiencing at the time.
Yeah, I've not heard that comparison before, thinking of it as the lost generation, but I agree with that. It's it makes me a little wistful hearing that from you, and that new revelation as well.
Well, let me clarify that a little bit. Part of this comes from, I saw a meme somewhere that was saying, what is the most overlooked generation? And then it gave the bullet point list. Is it the baby boomers? Is it the millennials, or is it the Gen X, or is it millennials, Gen Z, or Gen Alpha? And then it completely left us out. So that was the joke of the meme.
I'm a symbolism. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't disagree with it. I just, I agree with it completely. It's just, I hadn't framed it that way. It's a new way of looking at things, but yeah, you're right. We were it was a unique time. We were still dealing with the Cold War and the daily possibility that today is the day that Russia decides to push the button, and we don't really need to worry about catching the end of Gilligan's Island on TV. So, and we were a generation of, I got this. You don't need to worry about me. I'm fine. And there was a rebellious attitude, but a good clean one about it. And it certainly, everybody found what they needed in the music of that decade, whether it was from a Billy Idol record or whether it was from a Poison record. I think the music of that decade is so full of attitude and messages. And I just feel sorry for the decades that followed, where they just don't have I'm an old man yelling at a cloud, like a Simpsons character. I get that. But at the same time, I really find it hard to believe that there's the emotional nourishment in today's music that like we had in the 80s.
Yeah.
And,
It's
and
okay.
for-
Yeah. I say it's okay, Steve. Jim yells at his lawn all the time. So.
Constantly.
I don't want to spoil any of your book, but your story on Brian Johnson and Hell's Bells was like, God, that is freaking cool.
Brian Johnson came to us so unlikely. He was doing a charity concert in Clearwater, Florida for the John Entwistle Foundation. And I had a great relationship with the venue. I still have a great relationship with the venue in Clearwater, Florida called Ruth Eckerd Hall. And they said, Brian would love to talk to you guys if you have the time. And we're like, Brian would like to talk to us if we have the time. It's like, it could be at 3 a.m. Just tell Brian to call. And so he and my co-host Sean Daly and I, we were beside ourselves, not knowing how the hell what are we going to say to Brian Johnson? I mean, at this point, I think we'd only done maybe 50 podcasts. We weren't really all that savvy on interviewing, and Sean Daly was a rock critic, so he understood interviewing, but podcasting is a different beast. And Brian was just like this. He came on board. Hello, me guys. I'm here to talk. It's like almost like a pirate. I don't know. I can't do a Brian Johnson, but he came on and I was swimming in my knee pool this morning at 5 a.m. getting ready for today's chat, and we're like, oh, why is he sharing all? But then he went on and told stories about, we went to the Bahamas with the AC/DC, and he was sitting on a beach, and they had handed him all this music for the album and just said, go write lyrics. And he's like, oh, crap, what am I going to do? So he went and sat on the beach, and then, a thunderstorm started to form off the coast and started rolling in, and the lyrics to Hell's Bells became what he was witnessing as he was sitting on the beach in the Bahamas, in 1980. And he's telling us this story. And Sean and I are looking at each other. We're sitting across a table in our podcast studio. In person, we're 5 feet away from each other. And we're staring at each other, and our eyes are like, boing! Our mouths are dry. We're hanging on every word. Our skin is getting all tingly. And we're mouthing, he's telling us how he wrote Hell's Bells. And it was just that the whole conversation was like that. It was one of the very first interviews that we ever did where we just felt like, I don't even remember if we asked him a question. It was just him story time with Brian Johnson. And
Wow.
it was, when it was over, I think we hugged each other. I think we may have rolled around on the floor, the grimy podcast studio floor, just like little 12-year-old girls. We were just so, when you catch lightning in a bottle like that interview, you just want to go running around the newsroom and tell every single person what just happened. And that's what podcasting was like 15 years ago. Any day you went into the studio, you never knew what could happen. Like, it could be a Brian Johnson, or it could be a Cyndi Lauper, who's going to sort of be semi-offended at every question you ask. You just never know. So it just...
But that's the beauty of the book. It's just packed with those kind of stories. I mean, there's so many in there, and it's just like, God, that is cool, man.
Yeah, I'd like to think I had the courage, at least, because there's a whole chapter in there about the interviews that went badly, and I hope I get some credit for that, because for every great Brian Johnson story, there's an Andrew Dice Clay story, or a Cyndi Lauper story, or a Colin Hay story where things did not go great. And I own those. Those are on me. You go in there sometimes and you lay an egg. And at the end of the day, you just sort of have to own it.
And that's kind of what struck me on there as well, Steve. Back in my past, I was also a television news reporter, nothing to the depth of that, but I would do reports when I was in Marquette, Michigan, when acts would come to town. And I had those same type of things. Again, nowhere near the level to which you did, but being in the UP, we wouldn't get too many, but there were some that I think were absolutely fantastic. Damn Yankees came through one time. And Ted, being Ted, came to the television station, and because he went over to talk with our outdoor guy, I got him for a half an hour, and it was just fantastic. But I wanted to round it out, so I ended up with Tommy Shaw at the venue, and he was a jerk. He was like, I don't want to be here in this podunk Upper Michigan area. And the same thing, Jim Babjack from the Smithereens, I did one interview with. They had to wake him up at 3 p.m, and he had to ask us where he was. He didn't know where. All right, I'm ready for the. Where am I again? I said, well, you're here.
It's great too, because those stories stick with you just as much as every Steve Perry interview delights you and sustains you. There's a moment with a Tommy Shaw that just, you beat yourself up, and you kind of want, is he the jerk, or was I just having a bad day?
It could be.
So you never know.
One other section.
I noticed.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Jim. No,
I was going to say one other section, and this ties the podcast obviously in with the 80s and overall in general, and your history as a podcaster. Talking with the folks from MTV, some of those early VJs in the ones including Adam the Podfather, who's really got things going with this. Did that talk with him help get through, help start your end of the podcast and help you in how you were doing things?
Yeah, Adam Curry was maybe the second person we interviewed, or second or third person we ever interviewed. And the thing that made me feel good about that one was, I think he told us early on, even before maybe I don't remember if the tape was rolling at this point, but he'd said that he had listened to our podcast, and he liked what he had heard. And I remember it was me. I know it was me and Kathy Wass. I can't remember if Sean Daly was there. I think he was, but 2 or 3 of us were there, and we just looked at each other like, Adam Curry, listen to our podcast. And he felt like he was like the wiser older brother who just kind of set us off in the right direction and gave us that encouragement.
Am I remembering correctly that he actually helped coin the term podcast as well?
I believe that might be true.
Yeah.
I don't know if we talked about that specifically. I wish I'd love to have him back on the show, because I feel like I could do such a better job interviewing him today than I did 20 years ago. I haven't thought about asking him back. I should, but there's so many questions I have for him.
Between he and the other MTV VJs, this was part of a cruise, right? There was a few of them on a cruise with you, correct?
Adam Curry was a phone interview before the cruise ever existed. Okay. He that was like 2005, 2006.
So it was Nina Blackwood.
2016 is when '80s cruise started, and that was Nina Blackwood, Alan Hunter, and Mark Goodman.
Okay.
And so there they were in person. And if there's anything that's going to make your voice disappear and your throat dry up and your fingers start to tremble, it's when you're in the presence of the original MTV VJs.
Yeah.
And I think on that first cruise, I ended up standing in the men's bathroom next to side-by-side urinals with Alan Hunter, and I broke the cardinal rule of no talking in the men's bathroom and said something like, I think I said something like, "Hi, Alan, I'm Steve Spears from the Stuck in A's podcast." And he looked at me and he said, "But of course you are." And then a year or so later, Stuck in A's had reached the 500th episode milestone, and it was going to happen while we were on an '80s cruise. And so we asked, can we interview all the MTV VJs in person and record it for the podcast? And they said sure, and they agreed to it. And we did it in this big auditorium with a couple hundred people there watching as we did this interview. And I don't know that I've ever been so scared in my life. And at that point, I'd probably done 50 or 60 interviews, and the nerves were not as bad as they were in the beginning. But here they all are in person, and we met them backstage before we went on stage, and they came in one by one like it was some sort of episode of The Sopranos, and we chit-chatted for 5 or 10 minutes before we went on stage, and it was one of the more surreal moments of my life. I'm standing there with 3 of the original MTV VJs, and we're just shooting a breeze, and then I went on stage and introduced them, and I can't stand to listen to the audio of my introduction to them because you could hear my voice is starting to shake, and I can hear, even though you can't see my knees, I know what my knees are doing, and they're about to give out on me. So, yeah. but we had an interesting conversation, and it was freewheeling and everything you would expect and everything you would not expect, all rolled together in one giant hour, and it was sort of like a perfect microcosm of the podcast in general. Just every day is a new day, and that day was 100 days rolled into one.
Wow. What, when you think of the 80s, I mean, MTV, I that's just like the biggest thing to me. I mean, I didn't get MTV until 1983 because it cost more money. But finally I had to. And then suddenly a video comes on from the Human League, Fascination. I went out and bought the album. On comes Men Without Hats and the Safety Dance. Oh, I went out and bought the album. And it happened again and again. Thomas Dolby. Oh, I like that video. I'll go buy the album. MTV cost me a lot of money, but it was exciting to see these people doing. And some of them you look back there and go, God, do they look back at that and go, what the hell was I thinking? Or what drugs were I taking? But it's exciting.
Yeah, when I interview people, especially when I interview them in person on the cruise, I always ask, what was your MTV experience like? Did you find it awkward? Did you embrace it? Did you just not want to be there? Or did this feel like the opportunity of a lifetime? And literally, their answers just across the spectrum. Just John Easdale from Dramarama hated every minute he was in a video and just can't stand to watch him. And I regret the fact that I played one for him right there in front of 500 people, because you could just see him just scrunch into a seat going, oh God, I can't believe I did that. And then you would talk to a Howard Jones, and he's like, I loved videos. It was so, it was there was parts of me I didn't know how to express yet, and video made it possible. So you never know what kind of answer you're going to get when you ask people about, give me an MTV story. I mean, they all have a story. Not all of them are happy stories, but most of them are. I mean, it was a medium that defined the decade.
It did, and it introduced, especially from the UK, so many bands that never would have made it over here ever. We would never have heard them, but we're watching that. And then I go out, and my wife wants to go out to eat, and I have said, no, I just bought these 5 records because I watched MTV today.
Yeah, no, that'll do it. I mean, you're exactly right about the whole. It opened up the UK market to us. The Human League, Frankie Goes to Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
You certainly never probably would have heard of them if they hadn't been such incredible video artists. Duran Duran obviously made their name in video.
Oh.
It's impossible to overstate the importance of MTV in certain bands' fates, and I think that's what makes them so interesting. That's what makes the decade so interesting. I'll never run out of time. I'll never run out of questions for these people because there's just so much I want to know about how that time affected them.
Mm-hmm.
With
Definitely.
the podcast, I think you're doing some great work with that and with this book as well to keep this decade alive and keep it at the forefront. And especially for a generation like ours, we like to remember these things. We like to say that we were a part of these things. And I think that the work that you're doing through all of these mediums is something that's going to be very important for us as we enter, as dare I say, our mid 60s and into our 70s eventually here to hold on to these.
Hey.
Yes.
There's what worries me, or what I'm not looking forward to, is the day. I mean, there's going to come a day where these bands aren't touring anymore and they're not producing any new music, and we're already starting to see that with the B-52s and Devo talking about this being their last tour, and the Go-Go's are always talking about this being our farewell tour, and Journey's talking about this being their last, tour around the planet. There's going to be a day when live 80s music is going to be done by tribute bands and tribute bands alone, just kind of like there are with the 50s and the 60s now, and more so the 70s. I don't envy that day, but I'm just thankful that so many of them are still around and still sound amazingly great and are so willing to share the stories of those early years, and to look back with a certain amount of retrospective and say, here's what it meant to me then, here's what it means to me now to sing these songs. The meanings have changed, the faces in the audience, some of them are grayer and older, but some of them are bringing their kids, and another generation is learning to love 80s music. But it's it's part of life that eventually we will have to, it won't be the focus of my daily obsessions anymore.
Sure. Well, for so many of the 90s, many of them became lost. I mean, you forgot about them because we moved on. It's a new generation of young. But I've say the last 10 years, it's just these 80s shows coming in, and they're putting all these packages together, and they definitely are bringing people back in, and they're bringing in a lot of new people. We see young, people out there, buying records. They're buying the 80s records because it's highlighting the music once more.
80s was a decade where an album still mattered. I mean, an album was still a complete project. It was a vision. Yeah, it wasn't 9 singles strung loosely together. There was a through line between them.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that disappeared, probably with the advent of iTunes. But I still like to consume my music in album form. I still want to put on side 1 of Asia Alpha and listen to it all the way through each song and then flip it over. That's how I consume my music. That's how I honor my memories.
Yeah.
One final one here we didn't get to mention, and mentioned in the book, was John and John from They Might Be Giants. Steve pointed out that we may have a mutual affinity, a mutual affinity for them.
I texted Jim right away. I read that chapter and go, Jim, he loves They Might Be Giants.
God, yeah. I came across them completely by accident. They were a Columbia Record House mistake.
Yep.
That they sent me Flood, and I forgot to return it in time, and I opened it up, and I'm like, I've never heard of this band. And it was like 1991 at that time, and I was in my first job, and it just got lost in this shuffle. But I put it on, and I was like, this is some of the most amazing music I've ever heard, and I was so happy to have discovered Flood. And to this day, it's probably still my favorite They Might Be Giants album. It's kind of hard. I mean, people say, "Oh, you're betraying the '80s by listening to Flood. It's not an '80s album." I'm like, no, it's this. Don't pay that much attention to the calendar. It's still a very much of its time.
It is.
But yeah, the biggest mistake I ever made was when I interviewed John Linnell, and it's in the book. it wasn't our finest hour.
Yeah.
But it was, we didn't ask great questions, but it turned out okay. But that was one of the ones where that's completely on us. We thought we were being funny a little bit, and
John they're such an eclectic band, and as Steve likes to point out, I think I'm close to being a TMBG completist on the vinyl side of things, which is, yeah, they move well into the 2000s as well. I did see them live, I think back in 2019 or so in Detroit. Nice little show at St. Andrews. It was just a fantastic venue. I hadn't been there since I was a teenager, it feels like, but they still kick it out live, especially with the horn section now.
Oh, I know. You got to see them with the horn section. I've seen them twice now, and both times were just incredibly, stick in the back of my brain in the best possible way.
Well, Steve, it's been great talking with you. Tell us a little bit more about where folks can find your podcast and where folks can find your new book, Stuck in the 80s.
Sure. So the podcast is on all the major apps these days. If you search for Stuck in the 80s, if you want to go to sit80s.com, that's our official website, and you can see them there. And we also have a broken down there. So if you want to find a specific interview, like I just want to listen to the Adam Ant interview, boop, it's right there. The book itself, Stuck in the 80s, it's available right now for pre-sale for ebook on Amazon.com. But the paperback version will be released on March 11th. And then a week after that, it'll probably be on all the other platforms like Barnes and Noble and all the other online retailers. It just launches first on Amazon.
We will be sure to put links to all your stuff, by the way, in our description so folks can find you. Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
Oh, I say, and I will get the paperback version because I just have to have it in paper.
I bet. What if I get Terry Nunn to sign a copy for you?
Terry Nunn to sign it. It'll be like in a shrine.
Well, as we wrap up, Steve, I can't tell you that there is no decade that I would rather be stuck in than the 80s.
I love that. But, the title was originally meant to be an insult. And when you see it today, it's usually used that way, like you're stuck in the 80s. Like you're so backwards, you can't even live in today's society. Even the clips in our show, there's Buffy the Vampire Slaying, are we stuck in the 80s? Just with the stain dripping off her tongue. And I just decided, I'm going to own it. I am stuck in the 80s. Deal with it.
Proud of it. Well, we have been speaking with Steve Spears, who is stuck in the 80s, both on podcast and now in book form. Steve, as we said before, it's been great talking with you, and we wish you all the best with the book and the podcast.
You too, guys. Great luck with the podcast.
Thanks. Till next week, my name's Jim, and I own a record store.
I'm Steve. I'm a record collector.
Thanks again, Steve.
And I'm Steve. I'm a podcaster for Stuck in the 80s.
See you later. Thank you.